successful SEO migrations or web migrations done happily, successfully from an SEO perspective, right? And the reality is that this type of structural changes are not necessarily the ones that you envision that you are going to do in most occasions when you start an SEO process, right? This type of SEO adventures will find you when you least expect it. So at some point in your SEO process, your client might end up showing and saying, look, we will merge with another company, or we will rebrand, or we have bought this new domain in this new location where we want to expand, or things like that, right? So you will need to make the most out of this particular scenarios and situations that sometimes are not planned, because realistically, they don't necessarily need to have a negative impact. A lot of people think, and I am going to show how it's not necessarily the reality, right? Of course, if these are not migrations that you have already been planning from the start, that you haven't been able to optimize as much as possible everything to be ready for them, you might need to do a bit of extra work, of course, when this time comes. But realistically, you can always use these opportunities for this to grow, to make the most out of the situation, that you will likely need to do structural changes that sometimes you don't want to do otherwise. But since you are here already, it's then critical to be prepared, of course, and to make the most out of it. And this is what I'm here to share today. Unfortunately, I'm not a wizard. I'm not omniscient, and unfortunately, I haven't been able to be in all potentially completely types of migrations until now. However, I have been and I have helped my clients already in a few dozens of them from an international perspective, HTTP to HTTPS, rebrandings, etc. So I feel confident to be able to help you today to share the most important steps, the most important criteria and tools to support you through this process in a very actionable way, right? So let's start by understanding how far do you need to go and for what purpose. And for me, this is critical because there was actually a post like a few months ago by Jono saying there's no such thing as a web migration, generic one, right? And he's completely right, because we should specify, we should be aware of what is the purpose of it, of what is the goal, and if actually a structural change is needed at all, right? Because in most occasions we think of a migration of something that requires a URL update or change, or even a domain change, and sometimes that is not necessarily even the case. Sometimes we need to do redesigns or CMS migrations while keeping the URL structure. In other occasions, we need to migrate from an independent wall setting, or disabling non-canonical AMP URLs, for example, or yes, to move from HTTP to HTTPS or HTTPS, do a product rebranding, but sometimes even in particular pages, particular URLs that don't require a full domain change. And then in the other occasion is the extreme, right? Company rebranding, acquisition, or web consolidation. So it's important to specify this and to be able to identify which are the areas that actually need to be move, change from their own locations, right? And to assess the potential alternatives into that, right? And the potential impact that this change and update will have from an SEO perspective. Like, for example, when you do this type of changes while keeping the URL, sometimes you don't need to change it, right? It is going to be about making sure that the pages with a new redesign that doesn't require to change the URLs is still crawlable, is still indexable, is still relevant towards the relevant queries and already ranked queries, and even take the opportunity to improve this optimization to expand and grow more the rankings. But then, of course, there might be other situations where the structural changes are much more extreme. So, for example, when you are doing this type of changes, moving from different domains, you need to keep the rankings on terms for which the old brand was already being ranked and targeting well, and somehow even more relevant sometimes than the current one. So you need to balance there and to identify opportunities, how you can keep your new domain relevant for these old queries that might not necessarily be as important now, but you still need to keep them and to grow even more your visibility to these additional new terms, additional new queries that you all now need to target, right? So it's important to identify all of this type of highlights and focus that you need to take into consideration based on the type of migration. And then, of course, align the relevant SEO principles through the whole process, considering the migration type. It's critical that if we want to make sure that everything is aligned well and you don't leave anything out, you are involved right from the beginning, right from the start. And when I speak about the beginning, is not when you are about to execute it, but when you are planning still what is going to be changed and how it is going to be changed. So you can be involved right from the start and to help identify the best potential way to implement the change in a way for you to keep the old rankings and traffics while improving even more the SEO status of the site. So first, it's important to get involved right from the planning and that you are able to do a bit of testing, of course, before launching. Then, of course, to keep the involvement through the execution and until the validation and monitoring of these changes. So let's start by planning and testing the web migration before its execution, right? The first thing to do is to identify which are going to be the affected URLs based on the web migration scope. If it is, again, at a page level because of a specific product rebranding, or a category level because of an area renaming, or at a site level because of a full redesign, HTTP to HTTPS change, company rebranding, acquisition, or web consolidation. And then to develop an audit to have a complete, full understanding of the current website SEO status, for which queries the current site is already being run well, for which others that are relevant, the current website is not ranking that well, which are the aspects that are currently optimized at the moment, and which are those that can be improved, and how you can map this and how you can leverage this with the new location that you will need to enable. Then also to take into consideration that, for example, if this is an HTTP to HTTPS migration, you may also want to consider getting involved and checking well that the SSL certificate is correctly bought, it's the type that you require, that if it is needed to be implemented across many different subdomains, etc., etc. So from a technical and content and relevance perspective, it's important that you do a full audit of what you currently have and you understand well how it is optimized, the current organic search visibilities and status. What is the role that each aspect plays? Technical content, link popularity, especially if you are going to move to another domain that potentially won't have the same type of authority. To identify also if at some point it's going to be realistic to also expect that you lose a little bit of visibility because your authority won't be the same, for example. So it's important to assess here well to give the right expectation and to keep everything into consideration. And based on this analysis, it's important to establish then the required technical and content changes in the relevant pages, depending on the migration nature. Again, if you already see that the old pages that will need to be migrated have already very completely well optimized relevant titles and a good hierarchical navigation, well, it's something that you definitely want to carry to the new pages, to the new locations. And then, of course, if you see on the other hand that your current pages have thin duplicate content issues or there's a very slow speed, it's something that you then definitely don't want to carry and you want to improve in the new location. So it's not only about 201 redirecting and that's it. Of course, you want to start identifying and mapping the old towards the new URL locations, and we are going to do that at some point. You are going to see. But before that, we need to have a complete understanding of what we want to carry from each particular page and what is required and important to change and to make the most out of the opportunity to improve. Then, so for example, here's an example. At a page level for a high name overlay rebrand, we can see here how we have the before and after of these particular pages, how we can do a little bit of tweaks, how sometimes we have a couple of the scenarios, right? From a company X rebranding a product that is going to be now called Yellow Bee instead of only yellow, right? We can leave the URL if we don't really want to get into the trouble of doing all this structural changes, because at the end of the day, it's just adding a letter in this case in the URL. So let's optimize everything else and let's keep the same URL, make it the most out of the opportunity that there's a high name overlay and we don't need to do structural changes, right? So it's about identifying and assessing each particular scenario to see what is the level of actual change that is really required and how we can make the most out of this opportunity. Also to keep the relevance towards the old versus the new terms that will need to be targeted in each case, right? And for example, we see the other scenario here to the right, how in this other particular case, if it is possible to do structural changes and we really want to leave every aspect of the page, in this case, the URL also very well targeted to the new brand name, then we add the B there specifically to the URL, and then we make sure to 301 redirect from the old to the new page, optimizing everything in that page to improve the relevance towards the new brand and keep it also relevant to the old one too. So the same if there is a low name overlay or no name overlay, for which we will at some point, yes, implement 201 redirects, as we can see here in this particular case, how it's not only the one thing that we need to worry about, and but also we need to take into consideration that we will likely need to improve and update the internal navigation to start linking to the old pages and start linking and referring to the new ones, that we want to also keep the old pages to behave as legacy pages, to keep the old brands, the old products, relevance and rankings, and how they will need to live together, at least for a while, in order to maximize all the opportunities and grow the visibility, not only for those new brands that we want to target, new terms that we want to target, but also the still existing ones, right? So it's important to identify this, because as you can see, the way to implement the change, if we need to just 201 redirect from the current to the new one, or we want to leave the current ones to behave as a legacy page, if the new one will only target the new brand and transactional queries, for example, is important. So you will find all of these type of scenarios. It's important to very well understand that. The same if it is as a full domain level migration, right? If we move from an x.com site to a y.com site, right? In these cases, yes, it's very straightforward. We will need to 201 redirect indeed, but as you can see, it's what I was mentioning before, which is, I think it's very important to raise a little bit more awareness and to highlight on this, that now you will be highly relevant and likely already by default competitive for when people search for Y, but not for X anymore. But of course, you had all this visibility and rankings already very well established with X. So what do? You need to enable, in this case, you can see here a bridge, a legacy page that you should use to still ranking for all these people searching for you with your own name in this case. The same at a product level, the same if it is only a product rebranding as I showed before, or the same if it is this particular service that you used to provide before and not anymore. The same logic should be applied. So it's not only about just doing a straightforward 201 redirect and that's it, but identifying if you actually need to enable new pages in the new location in order to keep your own visibility, your own rankings, and to really improve it over time. So once this is defined, and you specify your SEO strategy based on the type of migration, on the goal that is pursued and the scope of it, it's important to align and agree with the project stakeholders to get approval, resources, and support for all of these implementations, right? From a marketing, design, UX development. I think that SEO is like the glue here that align a lot of this work between all of these areas. And that will make sure that the site is still accessible and relevant, not only from a user, but also from a search perspective, that ideally should go hand to hand. And when the required changes have been established and agreed, it's then important to crawl the affected URLs. So these URLs that you have identified that are going to need to be changed, are the ones that are going to be involved in the migration, to actually gather all of their SEO metrics. You really want to understand, and you really want to have from their, if they are crawlable or not, if they are indexable, where they are canonicalizing, their speed, where they are linking, where they are receiving links internally and externally from, their relevance, their rankings, their traffic, everything about these pages. And realistically, now we can do this thankfully much more easily by integrating with the third-party data sources directly into our crawls. For example, if we crawl with Screaming Frog or Deep Crawl, we can do a crawl of this areas that are going to be affected by the migration from our site, and directly connect with Google Analytics, the Search Console, or like link popularity indexes like Majestic, Href, Moz, etc. Or even with our own log file, if we want to actually validate the actual and real crawl behavior of our site versus our own simulation. So it will be rather much more easy like this to identify all of the URLs that are in the locations that we want to move, how we can make sure that we are not going to leave anything out, which is important, which is fundamental in this case, and then we will be able to additionally obtain data about the traffic and rank queries, which for each one of this. Like, for example, in this particular case, I used URL Profiler to additionally add this data for each particular URL, for which I already know that I want to move, and then I will end up having this type of sheet, right, in my docs and in my Excel or in my Google Docs, right? I will have it all in one, gather in one document, my 2 pages, the technical configuration for those pages, meta robots, canonicalizations, the HTTP status, etc. Their relevance, title, meta description, their headings, how much text they have, etc. Their popularity metrics, referring domains, the external links, their traffic to, and the rank queries, only one page. So like this, it will be much more easier for me to really assess if all of these pages are supposed to be located at the location that I need to move, should be able to be kept in the new location where I'm going to migrate, or if they can very well be merged together, for example, in a new section or in a new area. And this is what I'm talking about when I also speak about identifying opportunities. If I identify, for example, that there are like tons of URLs are just wasting pro budget, and I don't want to really move and keep to the new location, because realistically they shouldn't be indexed and not even crawled. So I'm going to make sure that these are not necessarily enabled one by one in the new location. They are 201 redirected to the location, to the actual page that is going to be indexed, and is relevant for them and is targeting the same type of queries that this all URLs were targeting until now. So like this, I will add extra columns in my Excel. You can see that I love Excel, right? So, and you will start assessing and marking these URLs as it's going to be migrated as it is, yes or not. It's going to be merged with another section, yes or not. What is going to be their new destination? Here it's important to already define the patterns that they are going to follow in the new location, where they should be migrated to. And these were the 201 redirects at some point are going to end up going, right? So it's very important to establish this as much granular way as possible. And then, of course, is about ones that I have already established which URLs I am going to move as they are, which are going to be merged with another section and are going to 201 redirect to a new location and the new destination, etc. I need to assess and I need to validate and compare if these new locations will be able to be as relevant for the for me pages, target queries, and rankings, right? If the new pages title descriptions H1s are going to keep the relevance than the old pages title, limit description H1s, and overall content moreover, right? So it's important to balance this. And of course, defining which pages, again, will need to be created at some point or enabled at some point in order to keep certain rankings based on each scenario, like a rebrand. Again, here, I want to make sure to highlight this, because sometimes it's not just a 301 redirect that is straightforward and like this, but again, knowing that the old pages are going to be 301 redirected or not, that are going to be kept as legacy pages, and the old branded queries are going to be targeted by these legacy pages, but the transactional queries and the new branded queries are going to be targeted with new URLs that are going to be enabled. Things like this, right? That can add a little bit more complexity to the process, and it is important and fundamental that we keep them into consideration to avoid any problems. What is important is that once these are all defined and agreed, which are the old pages to move, where they are going to be located, etc., and these are implemented, that they are not launched directly, that they are first tested in a private test development environment, that although it shouldn't be accessible to external users or crawlers or access in general without authentication, we will need to crawl. And of course, we have, again, SEO crawlers like the crawler streaming fraud that allow us to override the robots.txt or to configure for authentication there directly to be able to crawl this. I highlight on this because I have seen, unfortunately, many development subdomains stage in testing subdomains open to crawl or just being blocked by the robots.txt, and this is definitely not enough. And then once that we are able to test there, we need to validate the changes first manually, comparing the top old versus new type of pages in the test environment to check if not only the redirects have been set as we define, as we specify in our mapping sheet, but if actually, like, all of these different areas that are going to be affected by the change, from the homepage to category pages to the blog posts, for example, are keeping the relevance, or as in the indexable, or even faster, etc., that the opportunity has been taken to improve these pages characteristics in the new location. But all of this, of course, in the test environment. Of course, manually, we'll be able to do this only for a few pages, for the most important ones, for each type of the most important type of pages. But then, realistically, what we really need to do is to do a list call of all the old URLs to check, and first to verify if the 301 redirects have been set, effectively set as specified, to go to the relevant new location. So it's about here comparing in an Excel, saying, it's the new location where they are actually redirecting the same that the one that I specify in the initial recommendation, yes or no. And even more, going beyond, doing a full audit of the new web destination in the test environment to also check if the new pages are completely optimized as specified, if the titles are the ones that don't you define, that if the text has been expanded and if it is indexable as you wish, if there are any type of content duplication issues, if the canonicalization is the correct one, etc., etc. And at this point, before the launching, it's important that you start tracking the new versus the old web locations for your most important target queries, right? And don't wait until you have launched, because otherwise you might miss a few things, right? So it's important to launch with run trackers like SEO monitors or about advanced web rankings that will work daily at a daily basis to understand better how the trend improves over time. And if it is a new web location, whether a subdomain, a subdirectory, or a full domain, is also enable it, whether as a new property or if it is a new domain or a domain that you want to, or a subdomain that you want to track independently, so as an additional property, for example, in Google Analytics. And then definitely it will be much more straightforward with the Google Search Console, because it will always make sense for you to track it as granular as possible in this case, even if you were already tracking it in the past. And remember to use the old settings. So, for example, if in the Google Search Console before you were targeting this subdirectory, for example, to Italy, and you move to another domain and you're still using subdirectories, or you will end up using subdomains, but not ccTLDs for Italy, then you still need to carry this setting, this configuration, and you still need to configure it again. The same with URL parameters, the same with the preferred domain version to index. It's important that you set it again in the new domain. The same if you have these about files too. This has happened in the past that are important for you to carry also to the new domain, because remember that you have some 201 redirects in place, or you should have when you launch, right? And in migration with HTTPS included, it's important to make sure that the certificate, of course, is already installed in the live side, including the subdomains and all this additional properties that you use as CDN. So everything works well and is secure when you actually do the launching and endorse and refer and redirect to the HTTPS URLs. And once that you have effectively tested all this, it's time to move with the actual execution. So then again, when the new site is launched, it's important to check the 201 redirects, if they have been effectively implemented from the old to the new URLs as specified. This, again, a list scroll for this. And then this is particularly important. I have a lot of cases where, of course, the first somehow, even in a test environment, it was completely okay. When you launch, it is not okay. What do? It's about prioritizing to fix those high traffic pages. Here is all about priorities. Unfortunately, there will be always likely a few issues. So it's important here to validate and to prioritize those that are really much more important for your business and will really move the needle of your organic search visibility and traffic, and start fixing those, right? So all those 201 redirects going to the wrong pages, going to pages with HTTP 404 status, or that have redirect chains, or are going to non-indexable pages. It's important that you start fixing those with those pages with actual traffic, non-trivial traffic, and move forward from there. And then, of course, after this fix, you want to pull the new web location, make sure that the new pages are not only accessible, but are also optimized as recommended. Remember that you also wanted to take the opportunity to improve the relevance, technical configuration, etc. Right? So look for the URLs in the new locations that might be also still being blocked somehow. Maybe the robots.txt hasn't been updated as it should, or that are no indexed, or even linking or canonicalizing to the old URLs still, or even the URLs that were in the beta or the dev environment somehow. So it's important that you crawl them fully and update accordingly and fix these issues if you find any. And if the migration has included an HTTPS switch, make sure that there are no mixed content issues too. You can also identify this rather easily with a SEO crawler like default. And once you have fixed it all, and once you make sure that everything is in your new web locations, your new URLs as you expected, you can then submit them to the Google Search Console, as well as with the XML sitemaps to be recrawled. If you do a domain-to-domain level type of migration, you can also use the Google Change of Address tool. Unfortunately, this doesn't work with subdomains or subdirectories, or moving from a full domain to a subdirectory, or this type of mixes, just for domains to domains. But of course, if you are doing a domain-to-domain, this is something that you can also actually use, but make sure to do it once that you have fixed all of the previous issues of the migrations that are fundamental to make sure that are completely correct before moving on, right? And after the web migration is executed, it's time to monitor and make sure that you identify opportunities to continue the optimization. Remember that you don't finish that. SEO is not a one-time thing, but it's continuous, it's iterative and incremental. So it's important to, here at this point, start monitoring what has been changed already, your new pages. So you can use a little monitoring system like the rewarding here. So you are notified at some point their redirects are changed, and you don't know, right? Maybe the developer think that this is something that you need to have there only for a few weeks, which is not like this. You need to leave them for a little while, I will say even years if possible, or forever even. It's not going to hurt anyway. So it's important that you have a warning, that you get alerts when the configuration of your new pages changes. And then use the new Google Search Console is having the index coverage report. Is amazing to monitor if the new URLs start to get indexed and if the old ones are disappearing as they should. You can actually, in this particular case, go and see which are the ones with errors, the ones that are included, for example, and why has been the reason that they have been left out from the index, right? And click on them particularly and test directly and fetch them directly to see what the Google bot is seeing, right? And fix them accordingly. So the new Google Search Console offers all these new reports that are excellent to troubleshoot, and even share these reports with your development team to coordinate better and submit when any anomaly and any problem has been fixed already so Google can recall again, and usually in 2-3 days you will have an update from that. And as soon as you start moving, you will see also a dropping trend in your all Google Search Console visibility report, and a growing one, hopefully, in the new one, right? So it's important here that you start monitoring and comparing both the new versus the old locations, not only for, in general, the most ranked queries and pages, if these are the same, but also the search features that they provide, because they end up even influencing your even sometimes as much as your ranking, the click-through rate too, of these important pages. And going further, if from time to time, of course, you cannot expect that this happens from one day or another, but if after a couple of weeks you have already regained the same type of visibility that you have previously with these top queries and with the relevant pages, if the pages that you really want to rank for them are the ones that are receiving this type of visibility, to keep the relevance and the click-through rate and provide the user with the expected type of content and experience, right? You can also monitor this trend with additional keywords of your own, and you should actually, because in the Google Search Console, we can only find the most important ones, with your own run tracker, organizing them in groups to facilitate the analysis. Like in this case, I have done not only for desktop, but also for mobile, for not only the ranking spread, but per area and product types with SEO Monitor. And look for both desktop and mobile results to identify ranking behavior that is not evolving as expected. Maybe you see that the rankings of the old location have dropped completely, but haven't been completely regained in the new one. Maybe because there is also still an old URL that's still somehow ranking for this query, right? And that you haven't completely moved. Or maybe because this was not a full move from a domain to domain, but there are still certain areas of the old site targeting this that might still target this queries, right? So it's important that you take this into consideration and react accordingly, and you take the appropriate steps to fix if it is something that you actually need to fix. Track also your top queries versus your competitors to see your visibility share in your industry before and after the migration, to see if it has been fully regained after a few weeks or no, and complement this, of course, with third-party visibility indexes, not only with your own run tracking, but you want to be able to see the full picture to what anybody can see, actually, to see if there are, again, additional issues that you might have not identified. You haven't completely regained the visibility, but maybe because it is reasonable, because you haven't moved your blog yet, maybe, or certain areas, or if this is something that shouldn't be happening and you need to act accordingly, maybe because of an authority issue or a relevant issues that you need to move further with it. Check for your rankings also impact on the traffic, and this is important. You need to be able to correlate this ranking growth in your new pages with the actual traffic behavior. If it is the same or even better than the previous one, not only per volume, but actually conversion rate, the revenue that you get. At the end of the day, this should be the impact from the business, right? From the business side and from a business perspective, which is ultimately what you are looking for. So it's important that you identify this, and you can actually map all this together with run trackers like SEO Monitor. And by doing all this, you should definitely see a positive before and after migration traffic trend in Google Analytics like this. Ideally, hopefully, by taking all these steps into consideration. So you can see that it's about aligning SEO in the migration process while making the most out of each of the required changes to improve, making sure that you coordinate well and you take every single opportunity to make sure that your visibility is well kept and you even grow for more, coordinating well with all of the relevant stakeholders. And this is when you are going to tell me, oh, look, Aleyda, I wish I was able to do all this. But actually, most of my clients come when they have already had a disaster type of result, right? That I'm not able to plan this ahead, but they usually look for me just to recover the disgrace when it has already happened, right? So don't worry, I got you covered. Check out this post I wrote a while ago and I published a mass where I share also step by step how to recover your organic search traffic from my web migration program. So you can see there's always opportunity to grow. So I hope that with all of this, you're now able to win your own web migration adventure. Thank you very much.